thank you for being here. I'm Alex Hao. As Jake mentioned, I'm from Lumafield and we make industrial X-ray CT scanners. So today I'm going to talk about why battery quality really matters in daily life and how pervasive these devices really are. I'll then introduce CT technology and how we can use it to evaluate battery quality. And then I'll dive into an experiment we did at Lumafield where we analyzed over 1,000 18650 lithium-ion battery cells and go through the implications of what we found. Great. So lithium-ion batteries, they've been around for over 30 years. They were first commercialized back in 1991. And so their maturity has meant that they're pretty strong safety statistics, really. Right, it's estimated only about 1 in a million batteries is going to experience a reliability failure, so that's, not holding a charge anymore, kind of your device, as it ages, you kind of notice it doesn't last as long. And approximately 1 in 40 million is estimated to experience a catastrophic failure. So that's the kind of battery fire you see in the news, things that are really kind of more devastating. But even though those numbers are pretty good, at the end of the day, scale is what really matters, right? The average American, according to a study by Servo Solutions, found that the average American has 9 lithium-ion battery-powered devices, and I think all of us here in CES would probably have a lot more than 9 at home. And that kind of translates to over 10 billion batteries being manufactured every single year. 5 billion of those are the cylindrical form factor 18650. So that's named because it's 18 millimeters in diameter, 65 millimeters long, and they're really popular because they're really relatively inexpensive to make, right? They're cylindrical, so you just make them through a winding process, and you really crank them out in bulk, and you can assemble them together into packs to then accommodate the use of whatever your device may be. Oh, sorry, I forgot to move aside. And so that quantity, right, really multiplies that risk. You think 1 in 40 million, but then there's a billion batteries. And it's a lot of consumer gadgets that are maybe more portable or more expensive. They can use pouch cells that kind of are customized in size, super efficient. So you might have 1 battery in your smart glasses or your e-reader. But a lot of other gadgets, actually, you might think it's 1 battery, but it's actually many, many cells inside. Like my colleague's e-bike, which is on the screen here, that's got 39 18650 cells in it, right? So pretty quickly you can see how your exposure to battery cells picks up pretty quickly. A Bluetooth speaker, it's got 3. My Dyson vacuum battery, it's got 7. So they're kind of hidden around us, so you don't even realize how many batteries are in our daily life. And the other thing to note too is since that 5 billion of these batteries made every year, there's a lot of incentive then for maybe other people to try to get into the market and get a piece of that pie, because obviously it's a lot of money at stake. And so I'll just take a moment to introduce Lumafield. So at Lumafield, we make industrial X-ray CT hardware and software. And this allows engineers and manufacturers to look inside their products at really any stage of the product life cycle. We have our Neptune scanner, so that's about 60 byte. It rolls through a standard doorway. You can plug it into your office outlet, so you can put it in your lab. We have them in our office. We have a bunch, and it's super easy to use. One of our customers said it's easier to use than a microwave. We then have for production our inline or nearline solution Titan, so that's got a conveyor belt, and you can use it to make automated go-no-go decisions or to do process monitoring if you're really monitoring a large series of products at scale. And regardless of which scanner you're using, all of your reconstructions will then be automatically uploaded to our cloud-based software Voyager, and that allows you to do all kinds of automated analyses, say analyzing porosity or presence absence and things like that. And we have a wide range of customers from across industries, from med device to consumer electronics to consumer packaged goods. So here's just a few examples of some of the companies we work with. And in case you're not familiar with computed tomography, so it's basically using X-rays. You have an X-ray source, you're blasting that source, kind of like a flashlight at your object, and then the object's basically casting a shadow on the detector, depending on the thickness and the density of the material. That's dictating how much X-ray makes it through. if you're familiar with medical CT, right, the device like spins around you. In this case, they're products. We don't have to worry about making anyone throw up, so we can spin the product instead. So we take, hundreds to thousands of 2D images, which you can see here. This is an 18650 battery. And once we have all of these 2D pictures, we're then able to build the 3D reconstruction. So then virtually we can slice through the object in any direction and run all kinds of analyses to get like a full virtual model, right, without ever having to destroy your part. Okay, so since we have a solution for scanning at scale, I was kind of curious to just look into batteries a little bit and see some of the variability between sources. Most consumers are not actually buying 18650s, or you're buying AA's or something else. Some exceptions might be like if you buy vapes or flashlights, those might be reasons you're buying your own 18650s. But these are really common in a lot of devices, right, that we buy fully integrated. So I bought 1,000 batteries, about 100 each from each of these brands. 3 of them are OEM brands, so these are companies that we know manufacture the batteries themselves. That's Murata, Samsung, Panasonic. I then bought from Rewrap brands. So these are really interesting, right? They actually buy the batteries, presumably from an OEM. You don't really know. They could be like gray market, right? They could be, basically they take the batteries though and they put their own wrapper on it and they brand them. So like the red ones there, they're called Bapsel, so they're targeting the vaping market. And the kind of black one is called Trustar, it's targeting the flashlight market. Right? So they're repurposing these batteries for different industries. And then lastly, I wanted to get some kind of low-cost, cheap, and counterfeit batteries. And, manufacturers are not going to be buying batteries from Temu like I was, but if you're buying devices on Temu, which I'm guilty of having them, you don't know what kind of batteries are in there, right? So I bought these low-cost batteries are about $3 as opposed to $9 for the others. And the one I really want to highlight is the one called So Cool. So the So Cool one on Amazon was purporting to be an authentic Samsung 32 battery. And actually, when you measure the capacity, I got the same measurement of about 2,500 milliamp hours. So it's like, oh. And it's got the same pink color. And we'll see what those look like on the inside later and why. They're definitely not the real deal. Okay. So one thing about CT, right, the longer you CT scan something for, the more detail you get. But for certain things like inside of batteries, you can see the cathodes and anodes, the negative and positive layers with just a couple second scans. So we're able to use our ultra-fast CT technology, scan each battery in a matter of seconds. And so fortunately, since I have to scan all 1,054 batteries, we could do it in a few hours instead of many, many days. And then we have a battery analysis module, that's a software tool that can then look at those scans and automatically pull important quality measurements. So, what did we find? So first I want to kind of explain the key indicators we looked at in case you're not super familiar with that. So when we're looking at battery quality, we can really look at the alignment of the cathodes and the anodes. So one thing you really want is edge alignment to be straight, right? As you're winding that battery, you can have telescoping if that process is drifting in one direction or another. And that poor process control, right, first off implies maybe there could be other problems, and the irregularities can really lead to uneven lithium plating. The other thing you want is anode overhang, so that's where you have the negative layers, right, sticking out above the positive layers. And again, right, when you're charging, discharging batteries, you've got the lithium ions moving back and forth. If plating is forming in the wrong places, dendrites can form, and if those end up piercing the separator when you drop the battery out of your bag, that could lead to a catastrophic incident potentially. So, here in the image, the blue dots are marking where the anodes are the negative, and the red dots are the cathodes. So, 33 of the cells we scanned had negative anode overhang. So the industry standard is 0.5 millimeter, the negative is objectively very, very poor. And 100% of those came from the low-cost counterfeit brands, right? So that means of this category of cell, about 1 in 13 or 8% has this defect. When we look at the distributions, they exhibit about 7 times lower quality on anode overhang, and they had about 50% worse edge alignment looking at the distributions as well. And as an example, right, on the left you've got the high-quality OEM battery, it looks really straight, all the blue dots are over the red dots. and you look at the low quality value on the right, and like, that's just not right. So when we really start to look at the numbers, we can get a sense of like the distributions in the data, right, that were enabled by being able to scan the 1,000 batteries on the whole. So I have here a box plot for the smallest anode overhang measurement in each cell, as well as for the median. And as I mentioned earlier, right, the average the industry is looking for is about 0.5 millimeter. So you see those like first 5 brands in the middle, they're all like hovering right on 0.5 millimeter. They've got a tight distribution, like that's great, right? And then as we move to the right towards the low quality cells, we start to see really problematic distributions. When we look at the smallest measurements, right, you see the OEM cells, they stay nicely above 0. We start getting kind of close to 0 with the rewraps, and then every single brand in that low-cost counterfeit category goes negative. And here we can see the histograms, which I think further illustrate the process controls being implemented by the manufacturer. You've got the OEM cells, it's got a tight, normal distribution, more or less. But the rewraps, you start to see they're a little more irregular and a little more spread out. That's right. And then with low cost and counterfeit, you just see it's pretty out of control. It's so cool, right? I mentioned earlier the capacity performance when I tested it was pretty similar to the Samsung, but when you look at the distribution, they have absolutely nothing in common. And if you want to see what it actually looks like in the battery, these are the images of each cell that had the lowest anode overhang measurement. So you can see with the OEM batteries, right, you're still having pretty good overhang. But for example, if you look at Bankia over here, not only are the cathodes all over the anodes, but they're actually bending in over each other and against the can. So definitely we have a big battery fireproof cabinet at work, and that's not getting plugged into anything. And then the other thing we looked at is edge alignment, and that's basically like how straight your layers are, the effectiveness of your winding process. Again, like not really any surprises here. The cheap batteries are worse. But when we look at the distributions, one thing you can kind of notice, right, is that presumably the more reputable manufacturers, they have quality control processes, right? So they don't have all those outliers because they're being removed and they're being scrapped. Whereas maybe some of the less reputable manufacturers, they don't have that kind of quality control, so you have really quite a long tail. And again, just to show off like what that actually looks like in the battery, these are each cell with the worst edge alignment. And again, I talked about the counterfeit, so cool. It's not straight at all. It's like looking at a boat on the ocean. And so that's something that you wouldn't necessarily notice if you're receiving something that on the outside looks correct and at the performance measurement tests correctly the first time, but over time as that battery is used repeatedly, it's going to age significantly faster and just carry a lot more risk. Yeah, and that's what I really want to double down on, right? Because no manufacturer here is really going to go out of their way to buy the worst possible batteries, but there's a lot more risk around counterfeits and batteries that purport to do something else. Ultimately, batteries are a blind box. They're dangerous materials. They're not something you can cut into and take a look on your own. You really need a specialized lab to do that kind of investigation. And as I mentioned earlier, the performance looked okay. You can wrap the outside so it looks the same, and then immediately with CT, you can see that it's a huge, huge quality difference. And previously CT technology was a lot more expensive and hard to use, but now that it's a lot more accessible to use it quickly and inexpensively, this is one more way that manufacturers are able to protect themselves as they're auditing their supply chain and building their own products. Because ultimately, the risks here, they're pretty devastating, right? I think we've all seen a lot of the headlines about battery fires that have really had a real impact on people's lives. And so, as we reflect back on the data set as a whole, I think the lesson is pretty clear, right? We expect low-cost counterfeit batteries to be worse, but I think the data illustrated just how much worse they are. It's not just that you're taking a performance hit by saving a few dollars, but you're actually like adding a lot of danger into your daily life, right? And when we think back to the first slide, that kind of 1 in a million risk or 1 in 40 million risk of a failure, we see that that risk is not evenly distributed across manufacturers. And so you really want to do your best to minimize that and your own personal exposure. But we can conclude, OEM batteries are superior in quality and accountability. The rewraps we tested, they were generally really fine. But the unknown provenance is what creates risk, right? You just they could be fine, they might not be fine. You're really dependent on whatever their quality process might be, and if you don't have visibility into that, it might not be worth it for you to take that risk. And then low cost and counterfeit cells, they really have to be actively avoided, even if they seem like a good deal, right, at a third of the price of the OEMs. So kind of takeaways from the report, for battery manufacturers, we see from what we found in the data, they're already doing a pretty good job, right? Really, it's about minimizing your risk from shady actors in the supply chain. So you want to manage your scrap and really prevent batteries from kind of finding their way into the gray market, especially maybe rewraps. Sometimes it can even be that things are assembled and then the assemblies are scrapped and then those batteries actually repurposed and resold, right? So there's a lot of risk factors. So you want to keep an eye on it and destroy that scrap if possible. You want to supervise your channel partners, audit them, see what they're doing. And I really want to think about traceability, especially as we see more and more kind of counterfeits kind of rise into the occasion. For device integrators, this is where now there's a lot more ability for you to audit your suppliers and just double check what it is you're receiving, right? You don't need to have a really sophisticated battery lab now to take a look inside and see that, you're getting what you think you are, or to check things from batch to batch, or if you're onboarding someone new. It's important to design your packs to the right system level issues. Like when we look at the 39 batteries in this e-bike pack, right? You don't want, if one of those batteries fails, for that to spread for all 39 batteries to then experience thermal runaway. So definitely correct battery management systems are really essential. And then I think battery replacements, right? That's a really big topic now, to make sure users are able to replace batteries themselves. It's so important for sustainability to extend the life of a product. But if you are offering that, you want to make sure you provide your consumers with channels to buy safe, verified replacements and underscore to them, not to go the discount. But ultimately, if your device catches fire, you have a recall, it might be the fault of your battery manufacturer, but it's going to be your brand that gets associated with that fire, right? It's going to be your brand that takes the hit for poor safety, even if you've done your best. And so it's important to do as much as you can to prevent that from happening. And then for consumers, unfortunately, it's pretty tough. Like I said, most consumers aren't buying 18650s correctly. So we're really dependent on the device integrators to do the right thing and look out for our safety when we're buying these products. But what we can do is be mindful of battery uses, right? Don't keep them in hot places, try not to drop your batteries, and even just remembering that some devices have batteries. I think because we're so surrounded by devices, we can be really desensitized to that they're there, and they all carry a little bit of risk. Exercise careful judgment when you're buying batteries, so if the deal seems too good to be true, unfortunately it probably is. We've scanned a lot of viral products over at Lumafield, I've seen of our socials, for example, we scanned the viral Haribo 20,000 milliamp power bank, and of course it was so cute, right? It's such a good value, but then you take a look inside and that battery quality is really problematic, and you think of something you're carrying on your body all the time. So definitely be mindful of a good deal, unfortunately. And then the last thing I want to highlight is just being alert to common indicators of battery failure. If something smells kind of weird, feels warm, seems a little bigger than before, the faster you can act, the more likely you can prevent it from getting out of control. Okay, and that's it for my presentation. So definitely let me know if you have any questions, and we're over in the corner there as well if you'd like to learn more about Lumafield. Thank you.